Everybody, I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's 6 o'clock. And good evening, and I think for the first time in many meetings, I don't think we have a roster change. So I think we're good, and we have our designer and OPM representatives here, and of course we'll be talking more with them as the meeting progresses. So thank you for coming out. I do want to mention we are recording tonight for posting on the community access channel, so they should be aware of that. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes from August 27th. Debbie?
I neglected to put Kathy Marble, Cheryl Adams, and Marcy Lee under absent, and Jeff Ryan should be listed as non-voting.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other corrections, errors, or omissions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? So voted. So thank you, Debbie, for capturing these minutes as we go along. I really appreciate it. It's not an easy task. So. All right, I'll immediately turn it over to our colleagues from PMA. I guess they're going to kick it off, or...
This thing back and forth. Yeah, thanks for having us here again tonight.
And so just, and the items are kind of on the agenda are kind of integrated within the presentation. So we'll go over each of these items, although it may not be in the same exact order that's presented on the agenda.
Yeah,
so
that's great. Yeah. All right, we'll get right into it. So our first thing is just our project budget update. I think since the last time we met, we've only had one other invoice. That was invoice number 4 for PMA. The total amount for that invoice was $5,982. So that brings us roughly around 3% complete on our contract, which you can see in the top portion here. We also plugged in HMFH's A&E fee, which we're still working through right now, but that's the number that we have. So no real financial update besides the PMA invoice that came through.
So just to stick with protocol, though, I will entertain a motion to accept the financial update.
Move we accept the financial update.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So voted. And can we just do an update then on the contract? The HMF?
Yeah. So
HMFH contract.
We had some long talks with HMFH about the contract. We got it squared out. It took probably like a week of back and forth, just making sure all the scope items that were in there that we needed for the potential study of the potential sites on that too. So we got that squared away. It was their office sent it over to us. We flipped it to the town. The town has that, and they're probably looking at it with legal counsel right now, I assume.
Yeah, David, that's where we're at right now.
Yep.
Yes. Yep. Okay.
So we expect that to probably be executed, I would say, sometime this week, early next week.
Yeah, we actually had a kickoff meeting scheduled with MSBA last week, and I think in a perfect world, they would have liked to have that contract executed in time for that meeting. They postponed the meeting because of a couple of illnesses on their staff, so that sort of bought us a little time. It's not a end all if we didn't have it executed, but that's sort of a milestone they like to see. But certainly they have not rescheduled that meeting, but hopefully by the time they do in the next week or so, that we'll have it executed at that point.
And HMFH is working like they have one. They're plugging away full steam here. They're right on board on the team. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just to go over the MSB overview, so we are on step number 3 now. We're moving right along. So feasibility study. So this is part of the the program that we're looking into. A couple different submissions for the MSBA involved in this one here, and we'll. What do we have for a time frame on the whole feasibility? I forget off the top of my head.
8 months.
8 months.
For the whole.
Yep.
4 months for each of the 2 projects.
Right. And then looking to that first big chunk, which I'll talk about later, we're looking to submit to the MSBA, which is called the PDP Preliminary Design Program, and that is going to be in December of this year. Our next slide, we wanted to just talk about our MSBA reimbursement rate. So this is a good general overview. So for this project, we're currently slated at a 54.79 reimbursement rate with the MSBA for eligible scope. So there are some ineligible scope examples, such as they have cost caps for square footage. So 586 over square footage, 59 per square foot of site cost cap in 2024. So those actually just bumped up a little bit recently. Such things as square footage in eligible programs. So that would be like district offices, additional gyms, swimming pools, hockey rinks. But then there are also some incentive points that we can add on to this as a potential to the project. Energy efficiency, green schools, this used to be 0 or 2 points, it just changed to 0 or 4 points, so that's something that we could look at if that was a potential for the project. Other miscellaneous items that are ineligible are furniture is capped at $1,200 a student, same thing with tech, $1,200 a student, moving costs aren't covered. Private sewer, water connections, moving costs, land acquisition costs, office costs.
So there's a lot of information on the slide.
Yeah.
You don't have to remember it all. We will go through this in detail. It's the takeaway should be is that your rate is roughly 55%. You should not be taking the total budget or a total assumed estimate if you've got a number in your head of what the school's going to cost and multiplying that by 55% and saying this is what the MSBA is going to give us. There's a significant amount of exclusions in there that need to be calculated in, and we can't really do that until we know what the site costs are going to be, where the site is, and some of these other factors. So really the takeaway is just we shouldn't have the thought in our head that that number is the total budget times that number is the MSBA's reimbursement. It will be less than that.
So I had a quick question on the number of students, like what number do they use? The numbers that they provided us in the estimate for our growth from the MSBA?
The number of students will be approved based on your space summary. So once you decide on a project, what module you're going with, there's 3 in the feasibility study to study. Once that's decided on, the MSBA will approve your space summary with the student count and the square footage based on those students, and that will be the number they use.
So it'll be based on the vector space summary,
Correct.
not
Depending on
necessarily
the option.
what they estimated on growth.
It's basically the different enrollment options, correct?
Yeah.
So they
Maybe
give
for enrollment.
Yeah.
Right,
Which
okay,
I-
so it is what their already stated enrollment options were?
I think that's
Yes.
your approved enrollment number.
yes, and then based on which option you pick,
Right.
then that's what we'll approve for furniture and technology for the per student number.
And so, Sean, I also want to make this one statement, because at town meeting, when we went forward with the request for the 1.2 million, and we knew the the reimbursement rate feasibility was 54.79%, we made a statement, which I want to make sure is still true, that base number may not be the number at the construction phase,
Correct.
because they recalculate basically.
Periodically, yearly, they'll recalculate,
Right.
and it gets locked in
Right.
when they approve your project funding agreement.
Right, so if you go back and look at the town meeting, I think you'll see that that was a statement I made to make sure people were aware that they shouldn't even be counting on that as the base figure. When we get to the point, if we get to the point, we're making a recommendation to the town for a construction option.
And the only reason we bring it up, and we're going to talk about it a lot, is you see articles in the newspaper that come out and it's just incorrect, and we want to be correct, and we want everyone to understand accurate data is important. When you're spreading a message about a school project like this, we want to start off giving the town the right information, and we think it's important from day one.
Yeah, I like to think of it as 54.79% of every eligible dollar. Here we go.
I'm sorry, does anybody have any questions on that? Because obviously it's an important point. Good. Thank you.
Okay, so we gave you all homework. Hopefully you saw this on the agenda that was distributed. We're hoping that everybody's given this a little thought, and we're going to go around and ask that each of you talk about these issues. I thought I would take them one at a time, but I'm sort of thinking with this big a group, it makes much more sense to just have everybody kind of talk once. And then if you want to come back and add to what you've said, obviously there'll be an opportunity for that. So the big questions are what's your main goal or priority for this project? And what's your biggest concern? And how will you define success for this project? You don't have to answer, each of the 3, but these are really asked to help you think about the big issues for this project. Again, I think we said this last month, but there are certain things that you don't have to, there's going to be enough electrical outlets. There's going to be enough bathrooms. There's going to be security and fire alarms. A lot of these sort of basics are not what this is about. This is about sort of the big picture. What is your highest aspiration for what an elementary school for West Bridgewater can be?
Sometimes that second bullet, sometimes I ask it in a way of what keeps you up at night, which really resonates with educators. So maybe resonates to some of you as well. Like if you're thinking about this project, what makes you go, oh, what about this or what about that? So, I'm hoping just for wider ranging. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. It's just whatever you're thinking about, because we want to be thinking about your concerns when we're working, your goals.
Since no one's starting, I'll start. As far as the main goal, it's goes before we get to the actual construction. This process comes up with something that's not just defendable to the town, but that's easily explainable, that there's no holes in it, that things have been missed. So when we come up with whatever we recommend, it goes to town meeting, goes to the vote, and everybody really understands it, and it was, and it's complete. And it's gonna be a big deal project, no matter which one of those options it goes down, as far as what the town's gonna have to fund. So its main goal is that it's gotta be complete and defendable, whichever one we get to for the answer.
Any other concerns or what defines success for you?
For me, it's making sure that students of all abilities have the necessary facilities, that we have adequate spaces for kids that are in special education.
I'm concerned about the location. If we do end up going with a big building, where would we put it? And what would we do with what we're not using?
I'm gonna piggyback on Mary's comment about if we go with the big school, just make sure that we don't lose the small school personality that I feel like the town of West Bridgewater enjoys with our small schools right now.
All right, so hold the thought on the site, because that's going to get some further discussion tonight.
So, on that note, I think we're fortunate because we have a lot of municipal buildings and school buildings are close to each other. So one of my real hopes out of this and goals is that we can almost have a college-like campus feel. That we should be able to walk from one facility to the other, educational, municipal library, and make it into like a campus feel that fits with our rural agricultural nature of the town. From a concern, obviously cost, because it's going to be a large one, but really my bigger concern is logistics. 1,000 potential students, we're going to have logistical issues. Where are you going to put school buses? Where are you going to have parking? The other day I had a meeting at the Council on Aging. I literally couldn't get out because there was so much parking at the Howard School, people trying to pick up their students. So that's a couple of hundred students. What do we do when we times that by X? So that's really my concern. Quite frankly, I think a successful project is something we're all just really proud of after it's built. We know we need to do something. So if we have a school that everybody is really happy with and it gives that feel of the way West Bridgewater historically has always felt, I think that would be successful.
And I think to do what they're talking about, we're going to need to get public buy-in. That people who don't have kids in the school are going to need to think that this is necessary and the appropriate school to build.
And to go along with that, we started the process of visioning, but really getting the vision and the needs of the district for our students and our community that's going to last for the next 40 to 50 years.
We talked a lot about community spaces and spaces that could extend past the school day.
Yeah, I kind of went with both of yours. My main goal would be to have a space that's sustainable, that will reach all students for many years to come. My biggest concern is that some people in town won't understand what we need and why we need it. And successful for me would be that teachers, students, staff, and community members would come to our building feeling safe, supported, and with a feeling of belonging.
You touched upon a word that came to mind of as one of the goals is a safe building. Nowadays, we should keep that in the forefront. And I agree, one of my concerns too is getting the town support.
Gary, I'm curiosity, as part of the scope, are we looking at what we're doing with athletic fields and recreational as well?
Yeah, it'll have to be, because, you know, depending on where we go and what we do, just like the fields out here were a cost that, you know, we took the brunt ourselves, the same thing would apply there. So, I mean, if we end up taking the soccer fields at Howard School, there'll have to be some sort of, you know, how do we replace those, and what's the cost that the town will have to take up all by itself? It won't be part of the reimbursement.
But I do think we have to do something with athletic fields. We have a growing young population in town, and that has to be considered. And also here, I think this school did an exemplary job with the gymnasium that's downstairs, and I'm really hoping we'll be able to replicate that so that we children at that age can also have a gymnasium to play at as well.
To piggyback off that, for the YAA, the youth athletic, potentially combining two schools, we now just took away two gyms. And to only put back one would be really damaging to the athletic program, the basketball. We already don't have barely enough court space for those kids, so to go from two gyms potentially down to one would be an issue. And again, the concern of getting the town to buy into those things because it's an ineligible cost. That's a big concern for the YAA board and members.
So I think when you had a list of ineligible items, extra gym was on there. Does that mean that a gymnasium that has 2 basketball courts is a normal gym for the number of students that are going to be in that building, or would that be considered extra?
I think it's still capped at, they'll reimburse you for up to 6,000 square feet of a gym.
Okay.
And then anything on top of that would not be reimbursable. So that's why if there was one gym, 6,000 square feet, and then there was another gym adjacent to it, that gym would not be reimbursed.
Can you take space from another area and shift it around? Like when we looked at schools the other day, they talked about how they took some space from the library and made those satellite libraries in Westwood. Is that something that can be done?
The answer is yes, and we absolutely will be doing that. I don't think we can go, surprise, here's another gym at 6,000 square feet. So that's a little too big of a shift.
And we call it.
And we call it library, no.
But Easton's gym had, it was double and it had the divider and it had also a separate space in the same gym for APE and OT and stuff like that. So that's what I'm thinking, like, can you make a gym bigger? Not necessarily two gyms,
Yeah, I mean,
but
I think
be able to divide it.
be thankful you're not doing this, you know, let's see, 2008, because they wouldn't even let you build the bigger thing that you wanted. So MSBA has relaxed quite a bit over the last decade and a half. So they'll allow it, and let's just say programmatically, as we're all saying, if all these grades are together, what is the actual need? So it is going to be, and we talked about this before, a lot about the educational program. How would this work? How would we use these spaces? Is there enough, you know, availability of time to use these spaces? Because an end result might be, we need a 2-station gym so that all these kids, you know, so there's, if we can present the need and make it clear and understandable, MSBA is not going to say no off the cuff. Do you know what I mean? So we can't guarantee anything until they really start looking at what we're proposing, what we're asking for. There's a few things that I can guarantee. Special education, they're not going to push back. So there's a few things we do know that don't have to meet the letter of the space summary that they have. But they do err on, we'll give you more educational space, offices, not so much, right? So you know, their aim is about the educational spaces and serving the community as best they can. I think maybe just as a piggyback of having that slide up there, I always like to say to people, think of the MSBA as an assistance program. They're not here to pay for everything. They are an agency, a state agency using state money that they're trying to distribute to 360 communities. And so they can't say, oh, Westboro, you have everything you possibly want, but this community over here can't. So they try to even the level playing field. And so if we go into the whole finances with that in mind, that we're getting a lot of assistance, and it's terrific. I mean, as a state, we are incredibly fortunate to have the MSBA, but they're not necessarily going to pay for every dime. So that has to be a balancing act. As a community, if the value of that gymnasium space is so impactful, then that's put forward, you know, to the public to support. Sorry, bandwagon there.
Yeah, what Laura was getting at too is they'll pay for the 6,000. If you want to build a 7,500 square foot gym, they'll let you, but that 1,500 extra is on you, and all the costs associated with that would then be on you. And I think
Unless the program proves they need it
correct.
to serve the population.
And I think they'll let you go.
We
And then
will
maybe,
write our
yes.
program that.
But then I think they'll let you go up
Yeah.
to 13,000, but that's a max. I don't think they'll let you put a gym, unless you want something bigger than that, but that should be as soon as you're in elementary school.
Yeah.
What kind of gym is that? What does that look like?
A 6,000 square foot gym is a basketball court plus,
The facilities that would go along with it?
you know, sidelines and
Okay.
buffer zones, essentially.
And 12,000 is more like 2 gyms going this way and like a bigger one going this way. Not bigger, but like, so you could have bleachers for one,
Yeah.
like, court, but then you could have 2 with the divider curtain in between. That's 12,000.
Okay.
And so when you start looking at that as part of estimates to be talking with the town, they'll be giving us a number for if we only go, this is what we want, this is what it would be, but this is the extra that would be paying if we go beyond, say, the 6,000 square feet.
We're
So
a
we
little early to
could-
get
again,
into.
well, I know we're
But the
doing it
3011
now.
form, you'll be hearing lots about.
Yeah, but just when we get to that point, so everything's, the
Right.
information's all out there for people, so it doesn't seem like we're,
Well,
we don't want anything to look like we're trying to hide it.
We run every scenario through it with the square footage and eligible spaces, and then we'll present to the committee. You can decide which option is the best option to go forward with.
Anyone else want to provide input on the questions?
I'm going to ask a question. I'm concerned that, and I don't know if we've done this, I'm a little late to this group, about projecting for the future and what we are going to need as far as population increase. How long will this space be adequate for what we project? I mean, we're talking, somebody said 10, 20 years. Is that actually something that we can anticipate we will meet with whatever our final project is?
So I can answer in a couple of ways. So you all have negotiated with MSBA to come up with enrollments analysis. One of the other things that we do on all our projects and MSBA requires, you're not going to like this, but it answers your question, is we actually show where you can put an addition onto the building. And so that is for 20 years, 30 years, whatever it might be, that something needs to happen. So the enrollment projections have been approved, and that is what we are building to get the funding from the state. But we do look at the different options to be able to show to you if you need to grow because your enrollment ballooned past anything anyone imagined. You're able to do that. You're not starting from square one and saying, oh my God, I've got to go to a different site, or I have to, you think about that.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, we had multiple meetings with the MSBA to really push the enrollment, and I think they were very generous.
They were very generous and liberal with their numbers. Yes, it's basically a 10-year projection, but they, because of the growth that we've seen in the town, particularly on the residential side, that's affected by this, obviously, they actually factored in developments that have not yet been approved by the planning board. They're ones that we heard about in certain areas of the town. And they, because of our track record in developments that have occurred, they felt confident enough in us just even mentioning them that they factored those into their calculations. And again, they were very liberal. I mean, it took several meetings for us to get to that point. But, I put it this way, I'm more comfortable with the projections that we had for this project than how we got there for the middle senior high school. I think the flexibility that MSBA showed in working with us was excellent.
Okay, thank you.
My main priority would be energy efficient, user friendly school with, lower maintenance costs. It should take less maintenance and less funds to operate it than the existing older school.
So I'm going to only talk about, ever so briefly, utilities.
Okay.
So when we're replacing a building or buildings that don't actually have the highest and best indoor air quality, air exchange, heating, cooling, all the things you might want in a new building. Likely that your utility bills will be higher in a new building because the building is actually serving the environment. It's a big flag because people, the misnomer is, oh, I'm gonna have a new building, it's gonna be less expensive. I'm just talking utilities. It should be less for maintenance. It should be less for all these other things. But utilities, and especially, which again, we haven't gone down this road yet, but more of our recent projects than that are all electric. And again, we can talk about that, right? We talk about resiliency, we're talking about the future, there's gonna be a lot of big discussions on whether to do that or not. So in that vein, you will have a higher electric bill than you might have on these other
As long as it's
buildings.
efficient.
So it's as long as it's efficient, it's airtight, good windows, it's gonna have all the things that you want to make it efficient. But, and again, I used to say to people, you have bathrooms that don't have proper ventilation, and you're gonna have proper ventilation in your bathroom, so that's costs energy. That's my only caveat. But agree.
So it's going to be more efficient and use more energy.
To do that, yeah.
Anyone else?
I think a successful project, on just looking at the financials, is that we come in on budget or under budget and on time. Two of the schools we looked at, well, all three of the schools we looked at, no, two of them we looked at the other day, they came in millions of dollars under budget and on time. So that would be a hope.
Yeah, and again, I can't help it, chairing the committee for this project in the building we're sitting in. Your concerns that you raised about, proving the value to the town and getting the town's buy-in and producing a building that we can be proud of, and the budget. I'm sitting here checking those boxes because I think we did that. I mean, we had an overwhelming support for this project. It took a lot of work to get there, but we did. We came in roughly $1 million under budget. At the end of the day, it was tough getting there, but we did, and we were on time. So, I mean, you add all those things together, we've got a track record in doing that. Will it be a bigger challenge this time? Depends what the option is, but it certainly could be. But at least we've got the experience in getting there. That's what I take confidence in and moving forward.
And I think a successful project is built that has adaptable and flexible spaces. That years down the road, we're still able to use it because we didn't build it for one specific thing. It's built for the future of that things.
I don't want to shortchange the discussion, but we've got some other things to get to. Anyone else who wants to add to the list?
This is great. Thank you.
Great.
Keep going.
Thank you.
Okay. So what you're going to look at on the next 4 slides is the work plan specifically for the PDP, that preliminary design program, which is the 4 months that we're in. Since we were here last, we've started the educational visioning, and we've had a number of successful meetings. We've toured 3 schools. I'm going to go into each one later in the presentation. And we had a great meeting today with the visioning working group. I'll show you who that is. And talked about some educational visioning. That we also have begun site investigation. We met with our civil engineer, Art Cabral, the water commissioner, who's here, and we've started talking about some of the challenges on these 3 existing sites. We'll also be meeting with police and fire tomorrow to talk about, again, about the 3 sites, just what are the existing challenges and what is it that they want to see kind of moving forward. Here we are on September 24th. You've seen the agenda, but that's where we are. Between now and the next SBC meeting, We'll be continuing with the visioning. There'll be a full day visioning session with what we're calling the educational forum. This is a much bigger group, including a lot of people in this room. And we'll be continuing our existing conditions investigations. We need to get our consultants into the buildings. Meeting 3, we'll be again bringing back that an update on that educational visioning and the existing conditions. We'll be talking again about site selection, boring into the remaining sites, and we'll be starting to talk about enrollment sizes and very initial cost comparisons. Between every meeting, at each of the SBC meetings, we'll be meeting with the West Bridgewater Public School Administration and town facilities departments as kind of works with the flow of the project and kind of the information we need. And we'll be working with Gary and Mark to determine who are the best people to be meeting with as we go. In meeting 4, we'll be hoping for a vote on site selection. This will be a final vote on site selection, meaning that at that point, what we're hoping to be is we'll be bringing 2. So we're at 3 right now. By this point, we're hoping to be down to 2, and then at that meeting, voting to select 1. And obviously, we'll be bringing information, and you've got some tonight, to help you make those decisions. We'll also be continuing the conversation about cost, and we'll be talking about the educational program and the summary of spaces. So literally what spaces are going to be a part of the building and how big are they and how big is the building because of that. At that 5th meeting in November, okay, so I'm skipping over something really important. You may have noticed what we're recommending moving forward is a meeting every 2 weeks. It's the only way to get, so we're talking more specifically the 2nd and 4th Tuesday of each month. So 2 a month, not every 2 weeks.
I've been threatening that for over a year now, so it's finally
coming.
come to fruition.
So we have a lot of information to get through in until we get to December.
And to get enough information you to make the decisions you need to make in a timely manner. So again, that meeting number 5, beginning early half of November. We'll be talking again about the space summary as we refine it with the educators. And we'll be showing options, building options on the selected site, and boring into the decisions that need to be made about the enrollment options. At meeting number 6, towards the end of November, I gotta. What's that? Yeah, that's what I was just thinking about. That's what I was just thinking about. So we
We'll
may
be
need to.
confirming availability as we go and the holidays get close.
Yeah. We'll be bringing the space summary back. There will be more refinement. Again, talking about costs and the options of code upgrades, addition renovation, and new construction. And the hope is to be voting to reduce the enrollment options. Maybe to 1, maybe to 2. Our goal at the end of the PDP is to be at 2 at most. And then the last meeting in this phase, in this preliminary design program phase, will vote to accept a proposed preliminary options. We have to take 3 options into the next phase, into the PSR, and also voting to submit the PDP to the MSBA. Then, following on that, we'll submit to the MSBA, we'll continue working and moving into PSR, and then we'll get, a few weeks in, we'll get comments back from the MSBA that we have to respond to in the PSR submission, so in another 4 months. That PSR's preferred schematic report is another 4-month phase. At the end of that, we've completed the feasibility study. You will have kind of initial costs at that point, cost estimates. More so than at the end of this phase, you'll have some sort of initial numbers at the end of this phase, but at the end of PSR, they're more refined. They're still sort of order of magnitude. They're still from the feasibility study. That leads us into the next phase. That 6 months for schematic design, we're really laying out the floor plan. We're making adjacencies work. We're really getting into the nitty-gritty of how the building is organized. And at the end of that, we get a much more detailed cost estimate, and that cost estimate is the basis of the town vote, which we're targeting for, as a team, we're targeting for late November, but of course that's something that Gary and this group and the town have to sort of schedule and come to terms with. Throughout, we'll be having community meetings as organized by this group. It's not, I've listed it here at the end because I don't know exactly where you're going to want them, but they're going to be throughout this process from, soon to the vote and beyond the vote to keep people informed of how we're progressing. Okay, any questions on the work plan?
It would appear to me that what we are proposing to vote on December 10th potentially has an impact on the site, and yet we're selecting site on October 22nd. So, am I wrong? I'm surprised that in 28 days we're going to be voting on site selection, and we have some of these questions here that still are not going to be discussed for 2 more months.
So let me describe it. So in the process, right, we'll be analyzing the sites for fit, and we'll be doing test fits. You're going to see this tonight. We're starting tonight. And so that's the analysis of it. So you don't have to have the final footprint. We're looking at your different size footprints already with the different enrollments, how they impact the site, how they might work on the site, pros and cons on each of your sites. So that's the work we're doing now we have to make some decisions, right? And so it's hard to make all of them at once. So we're saying, let's narrow down the site and get to a point where we actually pick a site. All the while, we're looking at all your different enrollments, your footprints, the programming, the space summary. All of these things are also all happening and leading up to more finite building footprints and so on the narrowed down sites to select the site. And then we keep going with, on that site that was selected, the narrowing down of the different building footprints / enrollments. So it's kind of, decisions need to start happening in a sequential way because we can't wait to make all of them at once. If that makes sense.
And the process is this sort of constant refinement of decisions, funneling down to a final building, 2 years from now.
I think to what David was saying, though, if we're voting fairly imminently on sites, are you going to have multiple building proximate layouts so we know if we pick this site over this site, we're limiting what we can do on one site or the other? Would you have? Is there going to be?
Yes.
Because there's not going to be a lot of information about the site.
Yes, and you'll see in tonight's presentation we're already starting to do just that.
And I have a question on sites. When we met initially with the MSBA, because Roselle McDonald is the main school that we were accepted into the program with, they told us that they required us to show replacing that site with a building. So
Yes.
are we using up, I guess it's premature to say that won't be the site, but a lot of discussion
Yes.
has said that probably
I think we
won't
gotta
be
get to
the
the
site.
site.
Yeah, we've got more to show.
You're ahead of us.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
But
think-
over here, you're saying we're voting on sites and we're gonna be down to 2, are we losing one to
Well,
that?
this is a work plan that
Required
we
stuff.
think will work, but if we're getting to each step and there's we're not ready, we need more information, we have a question. That's our process. We will work with you. So we don't want to startle you with this. It is us saying, we have a schedule, we have these end game goals. So we just want to give a scenario of how that would work. If we get to the, whichever was the October, whatever the date was before, and there's we're not ready, we still have a question, we're going to keep working. So no one.
Right, but I think my question more is the MSBA requiring us to submit a proposal for the RLM site and replace a building.
They're requiring that we look at it,
Oh,
and
they're
we
just
will be.
requiring a look. so
Yeah,
it doesn't
yeah,
have
yeah.
to end up
We're
in
gonna,
any of us.
it's,
Okay.
we're not saying get rid of that today.
No, I'm
We
not.
might be
but
saying,
I'm
we might be
just
saying get rid of something else today, but we'll tell you that in about
But
5
what,
minutes.
okay, so I misunderstood that. My understanding was that was something that that had to be very strongly considered.
We absolutely will. We agree, and we absolutely will be doing that.
Yeah, I mean, very specifically, there had to be at least one option that included just the road zone.
In our final submissions
Yes.
to them?
Yes.
So
in,
then if we're
in your
only
final
looking
submission
at two
for
sites,
this phase,
You're right,
it
for
needs to be
this
something
phase.
you've considered. It doesn't need to be something you voted to move forward. It just needs to be
okay.
something you've considered and
So-
either accepted or rejected.
So we'll show
So
probably.
one of the two sites we're talking about voting on has to be,
Well, we're starting today with 3.
okay.
We're starting today with 3, and I assume everybody here knows which 3 they are, but you will in a minute. And the goal is to get to 2 before October 22nd. I should have started, Lori had said this, but I should have started by saying, these are targets. This is a kind of a living document. We are, working with and for you, and, as we move through this, things will adjust as we head in.
So I guess I'll just sum up what I was thinking. I think even in this room, not just community-wide, but even specifically in this room, there is some concern about whether or not we have consolidation of 2 schools into 1 or 3 into 1. And it would appear to me, without knowing the specific questions that's going to be posed, is that the November and December meetings are going to help us funnel in whether or not we're going 2 to 1 or 3 to 1. But clearly that has an impact on site location. So it appears to me that we're picking site location before we know if it's a consolidation of 2 to 1 or 3 to 1. And if you're going to tell me that my concerns are unfounded, that's okay, because I hear that every day. But, I am concerned that are we doing it in reverse?
I think that part of our game plan is that we're looking at the biggest one in all instances, right? So you know that the smaller buildings would work. Does that make sense?
Of course.
So we're not, choosing something that larger one wouldn't fit on. Because we're always looking at that. And
Yeah,
then
so-
going with a smaller one, we know will fit if the big one fits. Does
So
that help?
we're not eliminating site options based on our enrollment numbers right away.
Right, it's not,
Yeah. I
It's,
think-
we're really this first phase to us is talking about site analysis and the pros and cons of these sites and to hear your thoughts about the site. Because we do think that a site will be eliminated and then we'll be down to 2. And then that evaluation will be layered on with more information at that point. That helps.
Okay.
And on that note, on to sites, no.
Yeah.
Visioning maybe, right?
A little
Right.
vision.
Quick visioning
That's right.
update.
So I mentioned we're moving into, we're moving ahead with educational visioning. We've had some great meetings. This is the schedule. The visioning working group has toured 3 buildings. We also had that initial listening session today for 2 hours, and some great stuff came out from that. It just happened, so at the next meeting, we'll be kind of presenting the outcome of that. Friday, next week, right?
Yeah.
Is a full day visioning session. It's kind of conceived of in two sessions, one kind of in the early morning and one in the later morning, afternoon. And this is where big ideas about what happens in the building, the education that happens in the building, and how that education impacts the running of the school, the spaces within the school, and the adjacencies between those spaces. That's what that whole day is going to be focused on. And then the smaller group, the visioning working group, will get back together a week after that and talk about how what we heard at that full day session impacts the space program, how spaces are organized, where spaces go in the school, and literally which spaces are parts of the program and how big they are. Some of this might make a little bit more sense as I talk about, sorry. So these are the groups that I've been talking about. The visioning working group, again, is the one kind of in green. Are those 10 people at the upper left? Includes a lot of you here, but also some teachers, some people here. And then the educational forum, that full day session is everybody on this list. At the end
Still
of
needs to be updated a little bit.
this is the latest I had. There may be some changes, and obviously you can see at the end there's some invites that went out that hadn't been responded to, so we don't know exactly who those people are going to be, and there may be some changes. But this is essentially the group that will be part of that full day. So those three, we went to visit three schools, and some of these are pictures I took. These are notes that I put up here. We need to get a lot of feedback from the group that was there, and I'll be reporting back on that feedback, but this is just some of the things we saw. This was, how do you say it, Minot Forest Elementary School in Wareham. It's a pre-K through 4, big design enrollment, over 1,000 people, so it's kind of the size of your biggest enrollment, approximately. It's a consolidation of 2 schools. What you're seeing on the left is a breakout space outside of the classrooms, kind of off of the corridor. I talked to some of the teachers who were teaching there about teaching technology within that space, how useful that space is to them, how connected to natural light it is. It's not. And you're going to see some other versions of this kind of space in the next slides. The academic wings are kind of organized off of these double-loaded corridors with these breakout spaces off of them. To me, and it's not me that really matters, but the piece of this that was sort of the most exciting was this innovation hub. Connecting the academic wings was I call it a spine, another piece of the building that had these mostly open spaces, open to circulation, open to the students, not walled off, that included their library, it included a lot of different gathering spaces and storytelling spaces, different ways, and soft seating places for kids to gather and get in trouble, I guess. But then off of that open space were specific classrooms, STEAM classrooms, their art classroom, this broadcasting space. They were not sure yet how they are going to use that broadcasting space, and it's an unusual space for an elementary school, but it does, it could be some exciting opportunities.
Maybe because it's hard to tell, the 2 images that are at the top as well, they're actually part of the corridors, and that's why it's so unique to talk about them. Literally, people are walking by these, so one is sort of like a tiered seating area. Again, you can bring a group of kids out, they can climb up and sit on this, the teacher can instruct on something, or they can work on something. And the one on the upper, on the right, again, is really part of a corridor, because as a photo, it looks like it could be just a regular library, but it's not. It's actually spilling out into the corridor with lots of natural light and stuff. So again, there's a little clear, like it's not, I would look at those if I hadn't been there and been thinking, no, those are just spaces, what they're talking about, but they actually are part of the circulation, which is kind of interesting.
And then the art rooms had these big glass garage doors that ostensibly open up and could kind of spill out into this big open space. The way they had curtains on them and things, that I'm not sure they're actually being used that way, but that's the
Does anyone that saw this school want to chime in on any piece of it? Some pros and cons, right, for everything we saw. This one, we talked a little bit about, it actually had some pretty high-end materials that felt a little bit too much. And it was in part, we found out because of when it bid at a good time, the numbers were good, so they were able to do a lot of things. But
And I think one of the concerns we have is that those breakout spaces were out of the view of the classroom. So if you're sending a group of children out there to work, it would have to be with another adult. It's not in the
we
view
needed
of the
more
teacher.
transparency. Yep. So a lot of good discussions around these.
Before I go to the next one, anybody else on this one? Okay.
And it takes a long time to get to Wareham from Cambridge. It's a very early morning. Very early morning.
The next school we went to was Pine Hills Elementary School in Westwood. It's a K through 5 with a much smaller enrollment, 560. I think right now it's occupied by less than 400. Less than 500. And again, it was a consolidation of schools. What you're seeing on the left is again this idea of breakout spaces, but organized very differently. This is, you could think of it as a very wide corridor, and there are classrooms on either side, organized by grade around this very wide circulation space, but also teaching space, and that's kind of what was exciting about it. The bookcase in the foreground, a little piece of program from the library was peeled off and used as this idea of satellite libraries, one within each grade at top. There's soft seating, as you see. There's teaching technology, which you can't quite see, but is right there. That's one of these short throw projectors. So there's teaching opportunities. There was a built-in science, for elementary school, but science counter with a sink and cleanup opportunities. And you're seeing that here. This was a hydroponic planting setup, a science setup, and the district science coordinator was in the school working with, I believe it was the 4th graders, and the classes would come out and collaborate around this science activity.
So to Keith's point, this one has large, open glass, openable, any one of those words, glass right onto these spaces. So I think that the overseeing, the send a few kids out there, it really felt like it was part of the classroom more so.
And had the curtains when you needed to.
Right, and they were testing or something, yeah.
And that got a lot of people excited, the idea that you could have a large opening from a classroom into this space. We talked to a couple of teachers there, and they said they use the sliding door quite a lot, this big sliding opening, and they collaborate with teachers across the breakout space quite a lot. Between each of the 2 classrooms, so there's sort of 2 classrooms here, and in between them was a small group breakout room. This is could be used for interventionist teaching, but also for sort of group work. A comment was made on this small group room on this small group room that more transparency would be needed to the classroom so that you could put students in there and still watch them. They would often be with an adult, but in the upper grades, maybe they would not at times. And then there was a small, quiet cafeteria area for kids who need less stimulus during, what is a very loud time of day. Anybody else want to talk about this one?
This one had a lot of natural light. Even on a gloomy day, it was still pretty bright inside. And the material used in this building was not over the top, and it just felt like a space I'd want to learn in.
Yeah.
It felt comfortable.
One of the nice things that the superintendent said to us was that it was themed as a school in the woods, because it happened to be a very, green and treed site, so every time you're looking out, you're seeing that. And I think that they wanted that to shine, so they really were much more neutral palette inside.
But you can see, compared to the slide before, you can see, throughout the school, you're seeing out off into the trees beyond.
Now, to
Before we
give
move,
Wareham some credit, they were on a multi-tiered site,
Yeah.
so in some instances you couldn't have.
I was just going to say, before we move on, one of my favorite things about this school was they had a beautiful interior garden. They had like water chains, so they had chains that would collect water from the roof and funnel the water down the chain to fill little like creek beds.
Yes, yeah.
There
I
was
think that was Easton.
that was Easton.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm getting them confused. Anyway, lots of the schools that we saw had beautiful outdoor spaces. They had like a deck, and we talked about having staff meetings on it, so that's not nearly as interesting.
Right, so Easton. I don't have a picture of that, next time I will. So the next building, the next school we went to was the Blanche Ames Elementary School in Easton, pre-K through 2, similar enrollment to the last school, again, the consolidation of 2 schools. One of the really interesting pieces of this school was a ramp that connects all the way from the first floor, all the way up, and again, all the way up to the second floor, connecting the cafeteria, this piece of the cafeteria, to the library at the second floor. The idea being that it's wholly inclusive. Everybody, no matter what, is moving from floor to floor together and in the same method. You know, there's not an elevator over there for some kids and stairs over here. It's a very long way as you travel. And one of the things that they successfully did was incorporate a lot of interesting graphics and information and even some manipulables that were that were very kid oriented. And that was one of the big things about the school, was a lot of things were very child centric. Each grade had its own wing and its own theme. So the pre-K were the farmers, and the first grade maybe was the turtles, and the second grade were the astronauts. And so you see in the astronaut wing this sort of child-centric element of a low bench, kid size, these great fun graphics, and there was a lot of fun kind of designed into the school. You can see the breakout spaces in the academic wings. These are, I would say, somewhere in between the two breakout spaces that we've looked at so far. It was between the classrooms in kind of a wide corridor, but they didn't have the transparency to the classrooms, and therefore I wonder how active they are, and they also didn't have the same connection to the natural light. Here you see again one of these small group rooms. This one, instead of being on the corridor wall, is on the window wall, so it's got natural light. It was also somewhat bigger than the ones in the last school. And here, the cafeteria square footage, allowable square footage, was split between the main cafeteria here and another cafeteria kind of around the back of this kitchen. This is beyond, to the left. Conceived of as for the younger kids, maybe the pre-K and K, I believe. The main cafeteria had a large stage, so it's a cafetorium. The stage opens both to the cafeteria, but also to the gym. So it's a cafegymatory. I just made that up. And so, did they say that word?
Well,
yes. So this one for the younger kids had a very low stage, lower pressure than the big stage in the big cafeteria. Anything else? And this is the school that had that really beautiful courtyard with rain chains, a lot of sort of natural elements.
Did you say that ramp took the place of elevators or stairs? Or were they also there?
Not that it takes the place,
Just
but
an
that
option.
from a daily use point of view, that's intended to be how everybody moves from point A to point
Grand
B.
stair, right?
The other schools had a lot of stairs, and we saw young kids, first graders, that had to go 2 flights just to get to their classrooms or to the STEM room. So it was a lot of stairs for kiddos that might not be as steady on their feet, or in an emergency. I was thinking fire drills, getting all those kids out and down 3 flights of stairs. So the ramp was definitely, you could do that way faster.
I think what was helpful is not to really create just a wish list, but what we need in a building, what we want, what fits for our school is important to look at, all design features, and we had a lot of success doing it with this building project, touring a lot of places and kind of going through the wants and the needs for the building.
Yeah, and also realizing what you don't want.
Mhm.
Goes both ways, yeah.
I think what I left with is a nice building would be a combination of the Easton building and the Westwood building. I didn't like Wareham, it was
Yeah.
just too over, it was dark, it was, I don't know. It's,
Yeah.
But these two had certain elements of each that if we could merge together, we'd have a good
Yeah,
building.
this Easton, I would say, was definitely the most intentional for children, of everything in it, of even the footprints on the floor, but that was so kids who needed a visual of where they're going. They color coded different hallways. So everything was very intentional. Even those little cutout spaces, they're cute, they're fun, but it's also a place a kid can sit if they need a moment. So everything was very intentional here, I feel.
Okay. So moving on to space summary and site selection.
So just briefly, the MSBA provides you a space summary template on their website. Anyone can download it, and you can put in any enrollment size you want, and it will spit you out the square footage number. This will not be the square footage number of your building, but we wanted to give you a sense of scale of, how big are you thinking about for each of your enrollment options. So that's what we did. We plugged in each of your enrollment options that the MSBA has given you, and we've generated a rough estimate of gross square footage for each of those spaces. This is likely a minimum. This does not include any extra sped spaces, larger gyms, district offices, all of the kind of niceties that we talked about and things that you may want to include above and beyond the MSBA proposed square footage, but this is giving us a start. So it's really just a very, it's rounded to the nearest 5,000 purposely, because we don't want to, put too many decimal points in this. Just this is roughly how big you're talking about when you're talking about a building for all of your different enrollment options.
This also includes sort of initial assumptions about how big the pre-K program is. Okay.
Quick question, you might not know, those schools that they just toured, how close were the final square footages to what, like the MSBA fundable square footages?
I don't know off the top of my head, but
It just seemed like you were talking about an awful lot of outside space from the classrooms, wider corridors.
Yeah.
What does that do?
Yeah, we
in
want to take a
context?
look at, because a couple of the projects PMA has worked on, so I think they can get them for us.
Absolutely.
To do what you're talking about, which is how did they do it? Certainly, we've worked on plenty of projects where basically it's being a little creative and moving square footage and using it over here versus over here, and still staying within the overall MSBA requirements. So
Okay.
that's what we'll look at to do if something. MSBA is not going to drill down to every single space. So it's really what does this community want, for different types of spaces. They might say you have 4 small group rooms, but you need 8. And so maybe we're taking that square footage from somewhere else, so we're not adding to the project cost, but getting the
That's
space
where I was going
needs
with it.
Right.
and the adjacency needs.
We know that at Pine Hill, at least a certain amount of the space, I don't know, but if all of it, was carved out of the library square footage, out of each classroom. They said that 50 or 75 square feet from each classroom was moved into this space. And then there's circulation.
And I think conversely, with the Wareham school, I felt like the classrooms were bigger, but what sacrificed was the hallways were pretty narrow in some spots. That's what I thought, in just the regular classrooms. So maybe that's the vision they wanted. They wanted the bigger classrooms, but didn't necessarily need the wider hallways that the other schools had.
I think you felt that too, because Easton did similar to Westwood. We're taking the space from the classroom to make the hallway a little bit bigger.
For the Wareham and Easton, we'll have easy access to that information, so we can pull it, and then I'm sure that the Weston School will be hard to find if that's something you're interested as well. Yeah. The one thing too is the MSBA they won't drill into, like Lori said, individual spaces. They will give you some flexibility. What they will drill into is your educational plan. And does the building that you're building support that plan? And I'll say at every meeting if I can that how important that educational plan is to get correct, because that they are going to read that and they're going to make sure that your building is designed to support the plan that you produce.
And not more and not less.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So now we're going to get into sites, starting with the Roselle site. I've listed some pros and cons. I'd be really interested to hear more from people here. But you know, the size of the site is a pro. We think that the site you could build these size schools on the site. We're going to show some diagrams. It's on its own septic, so it doesn't add to the town septic system. That's going to be a big issue as we look at the other two sites. They do add to the town septic, which is very, very close to if not over capacity. It's working, and it works fine, but adding to it will be a big challenge. It has a lower water table than the other two sites, and it potentially takes load off of the town septic. It extends the life of the town septic, meaning that if you move grades from, say, here, pre-K, Spring Street, and move them to Rose McDonald, then they're no longer feeding the town septic, and so you've got less load going to the town septic. The cons are it's further from here, it's further from the center of town and the other schools and emergency responders. It has limited access, kind of from one side. There is access into the neighborhood, but we think that using that would be a challenge. And there's potential for access to Crescent, although it does cross a waterway, so that would be something of a challenge. There is a clear perception of it being isolated, and it, because of the pinch points in its access, it is kind of isolated within the residential neighborhoods and within sort of the center of this green space. And it does have some wetlands on the site. Yeah. Sorry.
I can close here. So as we dig into these, I'll just frame your minds for this. What we've tried to do with these footprints is, we want to help systematize this, reduce variables to help in that decision-making process. So with your 4 enrollments, what I'll call them, the middle two, either that's 6th grade, so either pre-K to 4 or 1 to 6, give or take a couple thousand square feet, that's about the same size of the building. So when you'll see as we click through that first line that's saying this is a 3 grade level, or it'll say it's a 6th grade level, or it's an 8th grade level. So that would be fitting everyone from pre-K to 6th there. So that was our first kind of, okay, so from 4 building footprints, let's say it's 3 building footprints that we're making decisions between. Then the next layer on that is that, as we mentioned earlier, we want to just kind of show you what's that range you can fit on the site. So as we click through, it'll be kind of usually what's the small end of that scale and what's the big end of that scale, and then that helps check the box where you can go, okay, well that site could fit everything, that site could fit everything, this site might not fit everything, and that can help weigh into that decision-making process. So for Roselle, this is that small end of the scale now. So this is showing what's the smallest footprint we might be looking at of a 2-story, it's just 3 grade levels, it's about a 70,000 square foot facility. Piece of cake.
And we really only showed this grade configuration on this site because it's replacing the Roselle. If you move the Roselle to Spring, let's say, then you would have to also include the pre-K and K and district odds.
Then, so this is now the opposite end of the spectrum. We do have a good amount of land to work with here. So you could also fit your full 8th grade level pre-K to 6 there. That's looking at about 160,000 square foot facility. This footprint's about approximately 90,000 square foot footprint on the site.
It
So-
is 3 stories.
It is 3 stories.
Is everybody good with the orientation of what you're looking at? Just want to make sure.
With that, I understand the orientation, but it's definitely going to impact school drop-off and pickup and parking for staff.
And well, I should preface and say, we've dropped a footprint on to show, don't pay attention to the, roads and parking and all that would be sorted out to appropriately fit with the building.
But a large building on this site would take some enabling work that to deal with transportation through and, carefully planning the construction so that it's safe for students to move through the site. It's going to be true on any site.
That's true on every site.
Yeah, that's going to be true on any enrollment. It becomes, more so as big building.
And because of the way you're laying out, you're assuming you're leaving the old building, you're not doing, you wouldn't be demolishing part of the building to make it fit.
The assumption is that you build the new building first, so that, the assumption is that the kids have
So we can't
know
just
where to
drop
go.
it in the middle because we've got to keep the school going.
Okay, so the spring school site, obviously it also houses the building we're in. The pro is that it's closer to the other schools and the town amenities and emergency responders. But this site is crowded. The cons are the site's already overcrowded, and adding 50% more students, which would be the case in the pre-K through 4 option, the second smallest option. That doesn't seem feasible on the site from a building point of view. The buildings would just be mashed together, as you're going to see. From a parking and traffic point of view, additionally, it would require either a building on the high school baseball field here, or a building which we've heard is not a popular option. Not on my watch. What we've heard is a no.
Not after what I went through
I didn't even drop it.
8 years ago. Help me out here,
No, we
We're not coming to the field.
Or would require a building here, which would require swing space, either modulars or, finding space in one of the other schools, which I'm not
And
sure
remember,
exists.
modular space is on our own dime.
Yeah.
Correct. And, where do you put those during the period of construction? It potentially adds to the town septic, not potentially, I shouldn't have said that. It does add to the town septic, which is, at capacity, and might require a wastewater treatment plant. I think there's a somewhat high possibility that it would require a wastewater treatment plant. I learned on Friday that you once had a treatment plant and moved to this option of septic. So this is a big con. I already mentioned traffic, and this site has the highest water table of the sites.
Okay, so this is the only footprint you're going to see here, because as we just talked about, we're not going to build a building. I think it's clear we're not going to build a building on the baseball field, the athletic stadium there. That's kind of a non-starter. So what can we fit on here? We can fit that 6th grade level configuration on the footprint of the existing Spring Street School. So that's kind of the capacity that's there, but as you were just mentioning, that's going to require swing space, modular classrooms for the population that's there during that construction period. That is on your own dime. You'd still have to figure out where those modulars are going to live for the time period that things are under construction.
It's a 3-story building, and it is really right up against this one.
Well, and
I mean, how would this handle the parking?
I was just going to say, unlike when you asked about McDonald's site, we said, oh yeah, we can figure out the site. This one, no. I mean, we couldn't barely even get a loop road around it, let alone parking.
So in some ways, this is what we were thinking about when we said, give us a minute. We're going to be talking about sites. This is, we believe, and you know, it's a decision for this committee, that this may be a site that can be decided fairly easily.
Yeah, let's finish the other school and then come back to that issue.
Okay. So the Howard site, the pros are that it's closer to the other schools and town amenities and emergency responders. There is space on site. I realize I missed a con. One of, most obviously, the space on site would take a field, so that's a con that's not listed here. If you are moving some of these other schools, the McDonald School, the Spring School, to this site, or in any any of the other configurations, where the school that's being emptied is a potential place for new fields. But again, this would add to the town septic and probably requires a wastewater treatment plant. It does add to the traffic at the center of town, and we'll be working with our traffic engineer to explore all these sites. But this does have traffic issues. And of the three sites, this one kind of has the middle water table in terms of groundwater.
It's a big graphic, it takes a minute.
Yeah, click very slowly.
All right, so we have a few options to kind of click through because Howard has a little bit more variability around where that footprint can go. So in this option, you're seeing that 6th grade level configuration happening next door, so it's definitely taking up a lot of the field space, leaving room at that southeast corner for a septic area. And this is a 3-story building.
Is it clear when she said when Stephanie says 6th grade level, that's either 1 through 6 or pre-K through 4? Either one of those, is 6 grades. So that's why it's being said. Okay. I should have clicked it and then said it. There it is.
Okay, and then so this now is looking again at the same size facility, same number of grades, but now we're doing it on 2 stories. So instead of being able to stack, your grades 1, 2, 3 above, now it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So it has to elongate that footprint a little bit, take up a little bit more space on site.
The pre-K through 4 option on this site would mean leaving 5 and 6 at Howard. So that one option would mean this building remains. The 1 through 6 obviously means that this building goes away.
So we have 2 buildings like kissing.
Yeah.
So assume that we would solve it better than that.
Okay,
It's just
yeah.
a footprint. Now, if this is the route it's going, this is us dropping. I've got my little template of big box spaces and number of classrooms put together, make it fit. In this scenario, if both of those really are staying and 5 through 6 is happening there, then things probably flip so that there'd be a better courtyard happening between the 2 spaces.
If there was the 1 to 6, is that then assuming that Spring Street would stay status quo?
I mean, that's what choosing the 1 through 6 configuration means.
But I think you have one showing. You have one showing pre-K through 6.
Yeah. And so now in this footprint, this is a scenario we did so that you can see, potentially your fields are still being mostly maintained on the side. That might be protruding a little bit in, work the geometries to lessen that. You are then, this requires the demolition of that existing building. Perhaps that happens in a phased scenario where that main bar happens. Now you could, while everyone's still being in the occupied building, they move over and then that second phase happens so that you don't need that modular swing space. So, fitting the 160,000 square foot facility on the Howard site is tight, but doable.
We'd have to think about Friendship Park. I mean, there's,
Yeah.
there's some impacts here. Yeah.
Well, then we get the extra cost of having to demolish. The other ones, we're not having to take any buildings down as part of the project. Now we have to demolish it.
Right, and MSBA does cover demolition. Now, they won't necessarily cover it on other sites we're not working on, but on a site we're working on, they would cover that.
Yeah.
Reimburse.
Yeah, that's an
their portion.
important point. If we do a consolidation and we take the grades out of one school, we would put demolition in our total project. If in the scenario we just talked about where pre-K and K stays at Spring Street, we're on our own for that. Nothing can happen with that as part of this project.
But if we're moving Roselle and Howard into one building, then you are able to demolish both Howard
Correct.
and Roselle. Okay.
Correct, right. Which would leave you options at Roselle for fields or something like that.
But demolishing Roselle would not be reimbursed, only.
Yeah, the
Right.
extent of demoing on a site that you're deserting, I don't know that MSBA will reimburse for.
Yeah, they reimburse if you have to.
Reimburse for when you're doing it on the site that you're working on.
Or in, like the Roselle scenarios, if you're building the new, that demolition of the existing building can
Right.
still be
But
factored.
Howard may still be Howard, and the town then decides, what you'd like to do there. There's a lot of possibilities of what could be there.
That scenario where at least a portion of Howard stays, would that be under the add renovation banner for MSBA? Would that's what they would consider that?
Possibly. So one of the ideas, I think, was that we would then be able to maybe do some reconfiguration work at Howard to make it a proper 5-6.
Right.
If it was a
Right.
DK4 scenario, right? So that's a possibility where the work would happen on both.
All right, so getting back to what we were alluding to with the elephant in the room earlier is Spring Street. So, I mean, you can see it, we can go back to that slide if we can.
This one or the pros cons?
Spring.
This is spring.
The next one. I think when it only has one pro and a laundry list of cons, and you look at the options there, I mean, we need to think about, the time spent in analyzing options from this point forward and what our friends at HMFH and PMA have to do for us in moving forward. The question is, are we quickly at a point where we should, right now, eliminate Spring Street as a potential site for new construction? Doesn't mean we're eliminating it from the standpoint of consolidation, just eliminating it right now from the standpoint of a possible construction site. So if anybody wants to make that motion, and then we can have the discussion to move forward.
I would move that we eliminate the Spring Street school site from consideration.
Second.
All right, so motion's made and seconded, so I'll open it up to any discussion, questions, concerns,
I
support.
think this one would clearly be the most disruptive to trying to continue educating all the kids at the high school and Spring Street. There's clearly not a lot of room to build there, so it gives us the fewest options for trying to fit something into the site.
Can you just go back to the other slide that showed where the building would be?
And that requires swing space. You'd have to demolish it first and then start building, which means you have to provide space for the current staff and students at Spring Street, and that swing space is not reimbursed, correct?
Correct.
So it's gonna be a lot more expensive.
I think
Gary mentioned, there's no additional parking.
There's no parking.
Modular unit for like a classroom is usually somewhere around like $5,000 a month. So how many
And that's not
classrooms we're gonna
feasible
need?
for preschool and kindergarten to have everyone in modular classrooms.
Not good.
Or a lot more than that, yeah.
More than 5,000.
More than that?
Yeah.
I mean, the rental cost is probably the least expensive part of modulars. It's the setup and the infrastructure around them, and then the breakdown. The rental is nominal. They front loaded, as you might imagine.
And then in that case, also the reconstructing of your baseball field, because we'll have trampled all over it, so that would also be a cost that we'd have to do. We put the modulars there.
So
Other questions, comments?
I mean, in this case, I think generally if Spring is not on this site, it's a betterment for this site. Meaning, now you could look at that space in the future and say, is that another ball field? Is that better parking? Is that better traffic circulation pattern? I mean, it almost not only is not good for one, it's actually really good for this campus, in our opinion,
All right, if there isn't any further discussion, I'll call for a vote on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? So voted, thank you. You have your marching orders.
All right.
First decision day.
Congratulations. Was it David, you know? Did homework ended this weekend.
Now, on these plans, the dotted areas, is that property that the school owns, or the town owns, or is that
It's
just
the
considered
site.
the site?
The site.
So
Well,
like
I
for
assume- I assume
Roselle.
it's also what the town slash school owns.
Okay.
I hope.
It's the boundary.
The boundary,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So you were up to say about Roselle?
No, well, like Roselle had, even outside of the site, there seemed to be a lot of extra space there too. And I don't know if that's wetlands or if it's private property or whatever, I don't know. But it seemed like there was,
Well, compared to what you see as cleared and you think of as the site, there is more site there. Is that
So
what you mean?
the
Yeah.
dotted line shows
The dotted
what
line shows the
is
property
owned
line.
by the town for
Yeah.
that site.
Yeah.
But then I think the people who live on Goldie Road would feel like they were being encroached upon as the trees are cleared behind their house. And look at how people reacted to Scotland
Right, There's
Road.
no way we're taking an option that would go out onto Goldie Road.
Or clearing trees all the way to someone's backyard. I mean, the site is a decent enough size that you wouldn't have to do with that. Someone asked a second question.
I just asked if the boundary is all buildable, but.
Well, there is some wetlands
Yeah,
that
that's
would not, yeah, so there'd be that to look at.
And the septic on the south.
Yeah, septic here, a small
They're
iso.
they're talking about,
We were talking about
Roselle.
Roselle.
Got it, okay. Sorry.
All right, so we can move on.
One other thing on the site, because it eventually is gonna come up. If you looked at any other town-owned sites, you know, just to go, maybe not to talk about tonight, but that in the future as it comes up,
Yeah.
that we have reasons why it didn't go forward for.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We've started that investigation and have a list of, 20 or 30 properties greater than 5 acres that could potentially work or don't work. And we're working through that list to see why they don't work and why maybe they could work.
So you'll have some kind of a matrix put together on the sites. Again, just so we're covering all our bases when it comes to presenting this stuff down the road.
Yep, we'll have that. But good question, because that's part of the process. All right, changing gears, unless there's anything for site.
Nope.
All right, project website update. All right, so we are gonna take over the existing website. We're working with PMA's marketing team and our internal team. This is just kind of our, template that we use for internal websites. Put the little Wildcat logo up there. But once we start, we met with the marketing team today. They probably need a couple weeks to get this thing live. So what we'll do is we'll start gathering information. We'll figure out the structure, what information is going to be stored there, such as project updates, agendas, meeting minutes, presentations, links to any project information. Once we start submitting things to the MSBA, we can have those on there, links to that as well.
Frequently asked
Yep,
questions.
FAQs will always be on there. So we want to have this as not only just a storing spot for the information, but we want to have it as a landing spot for people that are interested in the project too, right? So
Yeah, definitely, because it is, until we start doing formal outreach face-to-face, this is the point where people are gonna look, and
yeah,
I've already had some criticism directed at me personally about the lack of information on our current website, so we should try to make sure it's updated. And, if we're gonna meet on October 8th, it may not be up and running by then, but certainly by a month from now, we definitely should.
Right.
There is that quiet period from getting accepted to MSBA to then having something to show.
Yeah.
You guys have done all the work for that, but people don't see it. Yeah.
But even something like the next meeting hasn't been updated either, so, people are looking at it, so we gotta make sure that it's up to date, even if we don't have a lot of information right now to share.
Yeah, so we'll work with Mark and Gary, pull you guys in as needed. They got preview the website before we go live with it, obviously, and go from there. Hopefully a couple weeks.
All right.
Schedule. So we talked about this a lot already tonight, but this is kind of a graphic to help simplify it. I know James went through some of the work plan, but you can see Module 2, which is kind of what we're past, and then Module 3, you are here. We're in September of 2024. Quickly approaching October here. So from September to December, we're gonna work on finalizing the ed plan and then also the PDP submission. December 24 to April 25, we'll be working on the PSR, targeting a June 2025 MSBA board date. So all these board dates are tentatively scheduled on the MSB website, so we have to keep up to date on those and make sure that we're all aligning with our submissions, because we do have to get the submissions in ahead of time to meet a certain board date. Going into May and October of 25, that's when we get into schematic design, approval of SD and issuing the project scope and budget agreement, which would be a big step here in the project. And then I think James mentioned it a little earlier, but sometime around fall/winter of 2025, 2026, getting into the vote and approval of funding. So this is just kind of to lay it out here, get a good visual on it. Any questions on the schedule? Okay. Key dates, just highlighted the building committee dates that we already talked about, and ed plan, ed visioning programs are on there, and the PDP submission in December 24th. So we're not gonna spend too much time, because we already hit those before, and we've already been here for a while, so any questions?
All right, so the purposes of scheduling for yourselves as committee members. So in October, we will meet on October 8th and 22nd. In November, we don't have to decide right now. You can go back and discuss with your family members relative to Thanksgiving. But we definitely would meet on the 12th. We may want to switch the 26th, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving.
The 26th is a teacher conference, is that night?
Oh, it is, okay, so we probably maybe we should just decide now to do 12th and 19th, if that's feasible.
Yeah, because we have an off date, or an off week, right? So.
Well, no, it wouldn't be an off week, it would be.
Yeah, no, I'm saying off from our normal.
Yes, it would be, so it'd be 2 weeks in a row.
I mean, we're flexible, it works on our end as long as HMFH.
I mean, as long as.
We'll make it work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or would it be better off going the extra week and giving you guys more
Yeah,
time?
if you want to do that.
I mean, 1 week's not gonna be a lot of time for them
But
to
then
respond.
it has the same effect on the other
Well,
end.
maybe we switch to
Especially
3 and
by
17.
3 and 17.
December might be 3 and 17 instead. Because we ain't meeting on the 24th, I can tell you that much. So,
So
maybe that
on
happens if it works.
What do we have for the PDP submission? So we just have to make sure okay.
Does that work for?
We check the date of, the actual date of the submission.
I've got it listed as the 20th.
Yeah, I think we need to talk about that, because I think we had it as.
All right, for now, let's just leave it as October 8th, 22nd, and November 12th. And the dates after that will be TBD. But recognize we probably will have probably 2 somewhere in there, even though we may not be meeting on the usual Tuesdays.
We can also circle back on this too, because we have a little bit of time.
Couple minutes.
Yeah, that's what I mean, yeah, so we don't have to decide on that. Just confirm that we're doing October 8th, October 22nd, November 12th. And I know some of you have done this, but, we're a big group, we now are meeting more. We're now meeting more often, so you may have more potential conflicts with your personal schedules. If you can't be here, please let either myself or Mark know as soon as you can that you're not going to be able to make a meeting. Because obviously, we haven't had any trouble with quorum, and I appreciate that. I mean, it's been a great turnout at every meeting, even when we haven't had any real business to discuss. I appreciate that. But again, as we ramp up the schedule, and that's probably going to continue as we get into the design phase as well, just give us a heads up that you can't make it, just so we can keep an eye on the numbers to make sure that we maintain that quorum. So I appreciate that.
Clayton, I was gonna bring something up, selfish on my part, but the second Tuesdays, I have a conflict that starts at 7 o'clock. I was curious, I mean, I'll come from 6 till when I have to leave.
Yeah.
But I don't know how everyone else's schedule is. Would it be possible to start the meetings a little earlier than 6? I don't know how, again, some people, I assume it's not a problem, other people, that might be a conflict for them. But it might make it a little easier, or would make it easier for me. That's what I should have said.
You heard that?
Earlier.
The school principals heartily approve.
Love
Yes.
I mean,
It works for us.
I mean,
is
yeah.
5:30 enough? Should we switch it to 5:30?
5:30 or 5, either one. I mean, I wouldn't expect anybody before that, but I mean, even 5:30 would help. I'd be able to stay at least probably an hour and 10 before I'd have to bolt.
What's the consensus?
5 might be a little.
5:30
I think
sounds
5's
good.
tough.
5:30.
5:30? Does that help a little bit?
Yeah. Oh,
So do folks want to make that a permanent change, that all meetings from this point forward will be at 5:30?
Yes.
You okay with
Yeah,
that?
sure.
All right.
Did I create a problem for anybody?
No.
No.
Thanks. You're retired.
Thanks for serving on multiple committees.
All right, any other issues to bring forward tonight? Seeing none, David?
No.
Oh, sorry. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you very much, appreciate it.
Don't take your name cards home.